Hello, everyone, and thanks for joining us on Diplomatic Channel. This week on the program, amidst other global events, the NATO summit in Washington, D.C., the near assassination of former U.S. President Donald Trump, and the new UK government taking off, we found the UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer's remark on the UK-Rwanda Asylum deal most interesting. It's drawn reactions across the UK, here in Africa, especially in Rwanda. And given the country's presidential election is on Monday, we decided to dive right in. But before we do, here are some other discussions in diplomatic circles. I'm Amarachi Ubani. I'll be right back after this.
Nigerian President Bola Tinubu has condemned Saturday's attempted assassination of former U.S. President Donald Trump, describing the attack as distasteful. President Tinubu's remarks follow other world leaders, such as current U.S. President Joe Biden, UK Prime Minister Keir Starmer, French President Emmanuel Macron, and Canadian Prime Minister Justin Trudeau, who've also condemned the attack. The UK's Foreign Minister David Lammy has vowed to press on for an immediate ceasefire in Gaza and the release of captives during a trip to Israel and the occupied Palestinian territory. Mr. Lammy will meet Israeli Prime Minister Benjamin Netanyahu and the Palestinian President Mahmoud Abbas and make the case for a credible and irreversible pathway towards a two-state solution. Finally, South Korean President Yoon Suk-yeol has vowed to ensure North Korean defectors are not repatriated to the north against their will. Speaking at the inaugural ceremony of North Korean Defectors Day on Sunday, the president also condemned North Korea's erection of barriers, electrified fences, and even mines along border areas to prevent defection.
Welcome back. On the first day of his prime ministership, the UK's Sir Keir Starmer killed off a deportation plan that would see migrants who arrived in the UK illegally sent to Rwanda. Mr. Starmer had earlier promised to scrap the Conservatives' policy of sending asylum seekers to Rwanda. He may have been mirroring President Paul Kagame's sentiments earlier this year that there are limits to how long attempts to implement the deal can drag on, and how happy he would be if the scheme is scrapped.
The Rwanda scheme was dead and buried before it started. It's never been a deterrent. Look at the numbers that have come over in the first 6.
And with that, the new British Prime Minister Keir Starmer confirmed his government would not pursue his predecessor's policy to deport asylum seekers who arrive in small boats to Rwanda, ending the scheme before any flights took off, and spiralling into more reactions into the deal and the Prime Minister's decision. More than 50,000 people have entered the UK through irregular or illegal routes since March of 2023. It includes those who arrive in small boats and those who arrived through all irregular routes from April 1st to December 31st of 2023. According to the Migration Observatory at the University of Oxford, in early 2024, the provisional number of detected crossings of irregular migrants through the English Channel in small boats was around 12,600, a rise of 16% compared to the same period of 2023. Great Britain, a major destination for many of these migrants, boasts of an area of 209,331 kilometres and a population of 64.55 million. The growing number of migrants' influx raises concern of the burden it will have on scarce resources. Reform UK party leader and Member of Parliament for Clacton, Nigel Farage, said the new Prime Minister Keir Starmer does not have a plan to deal with immigration.
It was never going to work. What Keir Starmer is proposing, which is to, tackle the gangs, well, frankly, the last government were doing that for the last few years. It's not going to work. At the minute, it's wild and windy.
In order to be able to tackle both illegal migration...
Interior Minister Yvette Cooper says new counter-terror powers are needed to stop migrant boats crossing the English Channel and that government would set up a border security command. She also said she would be auditing all the money, legislation and processes involved in the now scrapped Conservative Rwanda plan.
I will be auditing all of the details around the money and the legislation and the processes, and I will set out more details to Parliament. But the first step in our approach to all of these issues is to make sure we are putting the money instead into boosting our border security, and that is why we are today launching the Border Security Command process to make sure that we can get the new commander and new cross-border police in place.
Back in Rwanda, opposition leader Frank Habineza praised scrapping of the deal.
It's a relief for those people who have been scared of coming to Rwanda, because some of those people say that they would even commit suicide if they're being forced to come to Rwanda. So it's been a great concern for us. Personally, I voted against this bill in Parliament.
Political analyst Gatete Ruhumuriza said the policy could have significantly tarnished the international standing of the UK had it gone into effect.
What image does it give of Britain, the Great Britain, to expel some members of the Commonwealth who have sought refuge in its country? What image does it give of the country that is expelling them? Otherwise, there's no image problem for the country that receives them.
Earlier this year, Rwandan President Paul Kagame had suggested UK efforts to introduce the asylum deal with his country was taking too long to implement. Following criticism of the plan, resulting in protests in the UK and lawsuits and rulings. He went as far as saying Rwanda could refund UK monies in relation to the deal should there be no liftoff of migrants from the UK headed for Rwanda. However, advisor to Rwanda's Minister of Justice, Doris Picard, has said Rwanda is under no obligation to refund the deal, having upheld its side of the deal, adding that the country had expended resources in preparing for the migrants and, quote, if there is any overpayment, that can be discussed.
Now, the deal may be off, but the issues remain. Let's bring in immigration lawyer Dayo Fadino to discuss this further. Dayo is in London. Thank you for joining us on the program today.
Oh, thank you very much. It's a pleasure.
And as I said during the week, I think the Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, calling off the asylum deal, saying it is dead on arrival, must be good news for activists and those who were against the deal. But have they thought through the implications of this? It means that the British government has lost at least £320 million to Rwanda, given apparently for free.
Oh, yes, indeed. As much as the Prime Minister, the British new Prime Minister, Sir Keir Starmer, decided to actually scrap this very particular deal, not too clear or sure whether he thought through the implications of actually doing this. His Home Secretary, Vet Cooper, is now trying to do an audit on the cost and the liabilities of what this deal would, the implications and what this deal will be costing the UK. Hopefully, she should have the audit report by the end of this month. But I'm not sure whether he actually thought things through properly, because I think the Rwandan Ministry of Justice has made it very, very clear that, well, look, as far as this deal is concerned, I think Dr. Doris Picard has made it very clear that as far as this very particular deal is concerned, they fulfilled their own side of the deal by doing all what they had to do. That what's going on right now is the case that the UK is their part that has not actually been fulfilled, and that they're not under any obligation whatsoever to give the £320 million back to the UK. So that's the current state of play we are at this point. Whether this could be negotiated, I don't know. But it's very, very clear, because the agreement they had was that they are ready to at least start taking asylum seekers from the UK. They had already ramped up so much infrastructure, prepared so many hostels and places. Asylum seekers are going to be, staying. If it was the case that deal went through. So the cost of putting together all the things that they need to do, the infrastructure, the hostels, the dynamics of actually, accommodating many of this, possibly even hundreds, if not thousands, of asylum seekers. They've already spent most of that money on doing this. The deal they had initially was the fact that this would happen. The agreement that they signed, both parties, is I don't think there's any clause or any part of their agreement which says that if, in case this deal does not go through, money will be refunded back. So that's the case. That's the situation we are right now.
And you're right, when you say there is no clause as to the return of the monies, and that's because the Rwandan government is also pointing out that there is no clause between Rwanda and the UK, which indicates that the Rwandan government has to return the money. But President Kagame had offered in January this year, said that Rwanda will offer the money if no refugees end up going to Rwanda. He had been speaking with the BBC's economic editor, Faisal Islam, saying the money was only going to be used if those people, speaking about the migrants now, if they come and could be returned if asylum seekers do not arrive. That should count for something, right?
That should count for something. But I remember, I think I saw that very particular, short interview with Kagame. And he made it very clear that, look, and I think when he was responding to Ismail's question, it was a knee-jerk reaction, really, to, in that interview, he responded in a hurry and a little bit irritated, really, that people are now going on about this money being given to the Rwandan government, that, look, if there's not going to be anything, coming out of this thing, we return the money. But whether what he was saying tallies quite clearly with what the Rwandan Ministry of Justice is saying, that the agreement we signed with the UK, we are not under any duty or any obligation whatsoever to return this money. So it's a question of what the Ministry of Justice is saying, which is based on legality, and what Kagame was saying when he responded that he will give back the money. He has the powers as the president to authorize the fact that, you know what, look, we're not doing this anymore. Give them back, give the UK back first of all, the 270 million. Then he then went up to, I think, about 320. He has that presidential fiat and power to be able to do so. But whether he would want to do that, an agreement is an agreement. And if there was nothing that was brokered in that agreement, that money should be given back, the Rwandan government and the Rwandan...
Now, one of the arguments that, against this deal back then was a question of whether Rwanda can handle more refugees. From my conversation with government spokesperson Yolanda Mekolo a few weeks ago in Kigali, Rwanda already hosts thousands of refugees. The country is the most densely populated on the continent. So it already has experience in this regard. But the concern really was, can Rwanda handle more refugees?
Well, I want to believe that if the Rwandan government could not handle more refugees, particularly refugees coming from the UK, if indeed Rishi Sunak had won the elections and he then started sending asylum seekers to Rwanda, I would want to believe that if the Rwandan government would not be able to, take on more refugees, it would not have gone into kind of negotiation with the British government and to state that they should be able to do this. You would remember that the negotiations went on for quite a while.
Yeah.
I remember so many ministers, the Home Office minister, a foreign minister, on so many occasions they flew to Kigali to at least look at that possibility of whether this would work. They came back with the impression that, look, it could work so long as we provide the funds and the facilities and the support for this to happen. So if it was the case that wasn't the case, or that it would not have been possible, I don't believe the two countries would have gone into negotiations in the first place to make this happen. Yes, they take on so many refugees from other countries, And the fact that they have the experience of doing that, I think the thought process would have been, if it's the case that we do this regularly, there's no reason why we cannot do the same with asylum seekers coming from the UK. I think that was the thought process, and the critical thinking behind the Rwandan government, accepting that they will be taking more refugees from the UK.
Scrapping the deal, however, does not wipe away the migrant problem that the UK has to face. I mean, and within 2 weeks, that this argument, rather a week since since the Prime Minister made his announcement and all the reactions that have happened, there have been migrant boats crossing the English Channel, crossing from the French Channel as well. Some of them becoming running into human traffickers on the way. Many of them at sea, at the mercy of rescue boats and all of that. It hasn't stopped or hindered migrants from heading to the UK. So there still remains a problem. What to do about illegal migration to the United Kingdom? What are the options before the government?
Well, at this point, and if we actually look at the reality of the situation on ground, the illegal migrants coming to the UK is a very, very big problem for the UK. Yes, the Rwandan option has been scrapped by the current government, but we are yet to at least have a very full knowledge of what the current government will be doing to address this problem. They are yet to at least state very clearly what they will be doing to curb illegal immigration. I remember when the campaigning was on, I think it was Yvette Cooper, who was then the Shadow Home Secretary, who was at least giving us snippets of what she thinks the UK government will be doing when they should at least win the general election. And one thing I know she stated very clearly, it was the fact that they would want to the border control, a part of the immigration office, that they would want to at least work on that very robustly, and to make sure that the border control facilities are in place, and that they will be working very strongly, and cooperatively with the other EU countries to ensure that they're on top of things. They would make sure, going by what she was stating then, that many of these people, the people who normally, facilitate many of these boats, going through the channel, and going through, also actually crossing the Mediterranean Sea, that there will be an army of patrol people taking care of that not happening and making sure it doesn't happen.
Yeah, I quite understand, how difficult this is. I mean, the UK is just made up of 4 other smaller countries. Britain itself, a small country on its own. The influx of migrants would just be too much, pressure on the government as well as social amenities. But we're having this conversation on the eve of the presidential elections in Rwanda, where Paul Kagame is seeking a mandate for a new 5-year term. Isn't it interesting that the implementation of the asylum deal which was to happen later this month after the UK and Rwanda elections?
Yeah, that's quite interesting, and a kind of coincidence, really. But when Rishi Sunak declared early this month that there will be elections, early last month, roughly about 6-7 weeks ago, that there will be elections in the UK, I'm not too clear. In fact, my opinion is I think he had a double mind, really, as to whether there could be a chance that he could lose the elections. But he had to call for the elections then, because I think there were so many problems happening his government was not particularly stable. There were so many people even declaring that they should change him as a leader. So I think he had no choice but to change his plot, and then just consider the fact that maybe we should now go for a general election. But I would believe that he had it back, right at the time he was declaring, he would have been thinking that there's a chance he could lose the elections. Now, but regarding the Rwandan elections, I'm not sure whether this deal was scrapped or not scrapped would have affected the Rwandan elections at all. Kagame is quite popular in Rwanda. It wouldn't have made any difference to him. As far as the Rwandan deal is concerned, it's quite popular, and there's a very, very high chance that he would be winning the elections again. Winning that third term, I think it's going to be the fourth term now. It's very clear that there's a very high chance he will be doing that. The two major opponents are not particularly strong on the ground. I think the last elections they had in 2017 is the two opponents, facing him at this point did not score more than, I think, about 3% of the votes. So I don't think there will be any threat to Kagame. There's a very high chance he'll be winning the elections.
Well, the president has received lots of criticism. He's been in office, as you rightly pointed out, for a long time, since 2000 actually. He's running again. He has addressed the Rwandan people. He's addressed some of this criticism that he's received, making a note during one of his campaigns, most of his campaigns anyway. He takes a swipe at the West, saying that no one decides for them, at their own elections. So no one should decide for Rwandans. Rwandans are the one who decide their own future, who should be the ones to decide, who eventually leads them. He's there to serve the people of Rwanda. Are you concerned that, as these critics are, the number of years he spent as a leader vis-a-vis the development that has happened in Rwanda? When you look at the infrastructure, when you look at education, ethnic unity that's taking place in Rwanda, are you still concerned about how long he's been in office?
I'm not concerned. And the reason why I'm not concerned for how long he's been in office is because that's the trend and the traits and trend of nearly all African leaders. When they're in power, they would not want to leave power. And I always maintain the stance that I don't believe any human being is a paragon of virtues or should have any monopoly of power for so many years. But that's just the situation and case with so many African leaders. So he's more or less an autocrat at this point, because he's been in power for well over about, I think, 20 years. He started as a vice president. I think he was vice president for about 6 years before he became president in 2000. So for the last 25, 30 years, he's been in power. I don't believe any human being for that matter, should be in power for that long, because it's not natural, if I could put it that way. Now, as far as being in power is concerned, and what he's done over the last 20 years, one thing I do know is the case that he's brought stability and to some extent some progress to Rwanda. We should remember that the genocide situation going back to 1994, when the country was in turmoil, really, in a state of anarchy, and not knowing where they were going or coming, he's been able to at least do things to stabilize that. The progress is actually brought back. The development programs that he has introduced to Rwanda, which has made Rwanda one of the fastest, in fact, if not the fastest growing economy in Africa. I think the growth is about 7% of GDP every single year, compared to the average that we have in the sub-Sahara, which is about 3.5%. He's brought so much progress to Rwanda, to do with development, to do with women empowerment, to do. I mean, the majority of the majority of women are in parliament compared to men. Is also empowered so many people to do so many things. Healthcare to some extent is free. Education is also free to some extent, but there's still so much underdevelopment in the rural areas that I think he's promised that he would want to improve on and continue with the trajectory of progress and improvement of Rwanda. So I would not fault him concerning that, but notwithstanding, his autocratic way of actually running the affairs of Rwanda is very, very clear and glaring to the whole world. There are so many opposition leaders that have, been, going by what we hear, that it was to do with his regime that have disappeared or been killed, but overall it's done well.
Yeah, and I think that, a number of people in Rwanda, at least the majority of people I spoke to, will tell you that they love President Paul Kagame, that part about the freedom of speech. You do see it slightly, but the general population of Rwanda seem to love him. They adore him and will most likely vote him in on Monday. Thank you so much, Mr. Dayo Fadino, for speaking with us on Diplomatic Channel.
It's a pleasure. Thank you very much. Thank you.
This is where we end the program this week. I'd like to read your comments, and I'll see you next time. I'm Amarachi Ubani.